The town of Pine Creek slept under a blanket of snow so deep and quiet it felt like the world had been muffled. For Anna, the quiet was not peaceful. It was a heavy, listening silence that pressed against the windows of her small rental house on the edge of town. Winter in the mountains was always long, but this one felt endless. It had started the day her ex-husband, Roy, got out of prison. He hadn't come to town, not yet. But he had called. The phone would ring in the dead of night, and there would be nothing but heavy breathing on the other end before the line went dead. A bundle of dead flowers appeared on her porch step one morning, frozen solid in the ice. Her mailbox was smashed twice. The sheriff, a kind but overstretched man named Walsh, would take notes and promise extra patrols, but Roy was careful. He was a ghost, a shadow in the pine trees, a chill that was always there even when the sun shone. Anna moved through her days like she was made of glass, careful not to make a sound, not to draw attention. She worked at the town's only diner, the hitching post, serving coffee and pancakes to loggers and truckers. She smiled at customers, chatted with the other waitress, Meg, and every single minute, a part of her was listening, watching the door, calculating the distance to the back exit. Most people in Pine Creek knew the story. Roy Mullen was a mean drunk with a temper that could turn on a dime. The last time, 3 years ago, had put him in prison, a shattered arm for Anna and a broken nose for a deputy who tried to intervene. People were sympathetic in a distant way. They'd give her a sad smile, a pat on the shoulder. But it was her problem. A private trouble in a town that valued privacy. Across the street from Anna's house was an old, run-down auto repair shop, Walker's Garage. Old man Walker had died the previous fall, and for months the place sat empty, its windows dark, a closed sign hanging crookedly. Then, in the first real snow of November, a truck with out-of-state plates pulled in. A man got out, a tall, lean figure in a worn canvas jacket. He unlocked the shop, and over the next few days, smoke began to curl from the stovepipe chimney again. His name was Ben. He spoke little, bought his supplies at the general store with cash, and worked from dawn until after dark. He had bought the garage from Walker's daughter, people said. He was a mechanic, kept to himself. He was exactly the kind of person Pine Creek understood, a quiet man doing honest work and asking nothing from anyone. Anna first truly noticed him a week after he arrived. She was coming home from the diner, the short walk feeling miles long in the biting cold. Her eyes, as always, scanned the tree line behind her house. She didn't see the patch of black ice under the fresh snow. Her feet went out from under her, and she landed hard on the sidewalk, her grocery bag tearing, cans of soup rolling into the street. Before the humiliation or the pain in her wrist could fully register, a shadow fell over her. Ben was there. He didn't ask if she was okay. He didn't offer a hand with a flood of concerned words. He simply knelt and began, methodically, to gather her scattered groceries. He chased down a rolling can of peaches, wiped the snow off a packet of pasta, and placed them all carefully into a new paper bag he produced from his jacket pocket. Then, he stood and offered her his hand. His hand was large, scarred, and stained with old grease. Hers was small and trembling. He pulled her up with a steady, effortless strength. His eyes, a calm, grayish blue, met hers for just a second. They held no pity, no intrusive curiosity. They simply saw her, saw the fall, and saw it rectified. "Thank you," Anna whispered, her voice tight. He gave a single, slow nod. "Path's tricky there," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Needs more salt." He handed her the bag, nodded again, and walked back across the street to his garage without a backward glance. It was the most anyone had done for her in months. It was the lack of questions that stuck with her. He hadn't turned her accident into a conversation. He had just fixed a problem and moved on. She found herself watching the garage sometimes from her kitchen window. The light was always on, a steady, golden square in the deep blue winter evenings. It became a strange point of comfort, that light. It meant someone else was awake in the silent world. The incidents with Roy's ghosting continued. One afternoon, she came home to find the lock on her back door jimmied, though nothing was taken. Just a cabinet left open, A chair moved slightly. A message. I can get in any time. Sheriff Walsh came, shook his head, and offered to have a deputy stay on her couch for a night or two. The idea of a stranger in her small space, even a helpful one, filled her with a different kind of dread. She refused. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every creak of the old house was Roy slipping through the walls. She sat at her kitchen table, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the light in Ben's garage. On an impulse born of sheer, sleepless desperation, she pulled on her boots and coat. She wouldn't bother him. She would just walk. The clear, cold air might steady her nerves. She hadn't made it 10 steps from her porch when she saw it. A dark figure, shoulders hunched against the cold, was standing at the edge of her property, near the woodpile. It was just a shape, but she knew. Her blood turned to ice. She froze, unable to move forward or back. The figure took a step toward her. At that moment, the door of Walker's garage opened with a scrape of metal. Ben stepped out, holding a large metal wrench. He didn't look at Anna. He looked straight at the dark figure by the woodpile. He didn't shout. He didn't run. He simply walked across the empty street, his boots crunching purposefully in the snow. He walked past Anna as if she were a tree, placing himself squarely between her and the figure. The figure, Roy, stopped. Ben was taller, broader in the shoulders. He said nothing. He just stood there, a solid, silent wall in the moonlight. He lifted the wrench slightly, not in a threatening swing, but simply adjusting his grip, making its solid weight known. The silence lasted a full minute. It was louder than any shout. Then, Roy's figure shifted. He took one slow step backward, then another. He turned and melted into the blackness of the pines. Ben watched the trees for a long moment. Then he turned to look at Anna. Her hands were pressed over her mouth, her whole body shaking. "You should go inside," he said, his voice the same low rumble. "Lock your door. I'll be right here." Not "I'll walk you," or "Are you okay?" Just a simple statement of fact and a promise. "I'll be right here." Anna stumbled back into her house, locked the door, and leaned against it, her heart hammering. She peered through the window. Ben didn't go back to his garage. He walked to the middle of the empty street, right under the one flickering streetlight. He leaned against the light pole, the wrench still in his hand, and he lit a cigarette. The small, glowing ember was the only point of light in the darkness. He stood there, a silent sentinel, for over an hour before he finally walked back to his shop. Anna slept that night, a deep, dreamless sleep for the first time in weeks. The longest winter of her life had found its first, small crack of light. A quiet man in a worn jacket, standing under a streetlight, saying nothing but meaning everything. The morning after Ben stood guard in the street, the world looked the same, but it felt different. The snow was still deep, the sky still a pale, cold gray, but the heavy dread in Anna's chest had loosened, just a little. She woke not with a jolt of fear, but with a memory of a small, glowing ember in the darkness. She looked out her kitchen window. The garage door was open, light spilling onto the trampled snow. Ben was already at work, the steady, rhythmic sound of a metal hammer on steel drifting across the quiet street. She went to work at the diner, pouring coffee and taking orders. Her hands still shook when the bell over the door jangled, but she felt a new thread of resolve inside her. Someone had seen. Someone had acted. She wasn't completely invisible. "You look better," Meg, the other waitress, commented softly as they refilled ketchup bottles during a lull. "A little less like you're about to jump out of your skin." Anna just gave a small, tight smile. "Slept okay, for once." Meg followed her gaze out the window toward the auto shop. "Heard about your new neighbor, Ben. Quiet fella." "He's kind," Anna said, the word feeling strange on her tongue. Kindness had been a rare commodity. That afternoon, carrying a bag of groceries home, Anna paused on her porch. She looked at the spot where Ben had gathered her spilled cans. She looked at the streetlight pole where he had stood. An idea, fragile and bold, formed in her mind. She didn't go inside. She crossed the street. The inside of Walker's garage was a cathedral of ordered chaos. Tools hung in neat rows on shadow boards. Engine parts were stacked on shelves. The air smelled of oil, metal, and coffee. Ben was under the hood of an old, green pickup truck. He didn't look up as she entered, but she knew he'd heard the bell on the door. "Mr. Walker," she said, using the name on the shop sign. He slid out from under the hood. His face was smudged with grease, his expression neutral. "Just Ben," he said, wiping his hands on a red rag. "I'm Anna. From across the street." She felt foolish stating the obvious. He nodded. He knew. She took a breath. I wanted to thank you. For last night." "Didn't do anything," he said, his gaze steady. "Just stood there." "That was everything," she replied, her voice firming. She held out the paper bag she carried. "I made too much stew. It's beef. I thought, if you wanted some. For your dinner. To say thank you for just standing there." He looked at the bag, then at her face. His eyes held that same assessing calm, no suspicion, no exaggerated gratitude. He saw the offer for what it was, a gesture of thanks, and a bridge. After a moment, he reached out and took the bag. "Thank you," he said. "I'll return the dish." "No rush," she said, and a real, small smile touched her lips. She turned to leave. "Anna." His voice stopped her. She looked back. He was still holding the pot. "Your lock. The back door. It's a cheap one. Easy to force. I could put a deadbolt on. A good one. Would take 20 minutes." The offer was as practical and straightforward as his presence the night before. It wasn't about pity, it was about solving a problem. A problem he had seen and understood. I couldn't ask you to do that," she said. "You didn't ask. I'm offering. Tonight, after I close up." She hesitated, then nodded. "Okay. Thank you, Ben." 6:30, he said, and turned back to the green truck's engine. At 6:25, she saw him cross the street, a metal toolbox in one hand. He worked with quiet efficiency, removing the old, flimsy lock and installing a heavy, steel deadbolt with a thick metal plate. He tested it, the solid thunk of the bolt throwing sounding like security itself. "There," he said, packing his tools. "This'll stop a truck." "How much do I owe you?" Anna asked, reaching for her purse. He shook his head. "For the stew." He paused at the door. "You see anything at all, you turn on your porch light. The one that's burnt out. I put a new bulb in it this afternoon. You turn it on, I'll see it." He didn't say what he would do if he saw it. He didn't need to. The promise was in the simple instruction. A signal. A connection. Anna did not see Roy that week, but she felt him. One morning, her trash cans were tipped over, the contents strewn across the snowy yard. Another time, a deep, malicious scratch appeared along the driver's side door of her old sedan, parked in her driveway. Each time, she cleaned it up, reported it to Sheriff Walsh, and when darkness fell, she would turn on her bright, new porch light. Within minutes, the light in Ben's garage would shift. He would come to the door, or step outside to sweep the already clean step, a silent acknowledgement, asterisk message received. "I'm here." Asterisk. They did not become friends. They did not share their life stories. Their interaction was built on these small, silent exchanges. Anna would bring him a slice of pie from the diner. Ben would have her car up on the lift, checking the brakes or rotating the tires, and simply say, "It's done," when she asked what she owed. "For the pie," he'd say. The town noticed. Sheriff Walsh stopped Anna one day. "I see Walker's keeping an eye out," he said, sounding relieved. "Good man. Solid. Roy won't like that." That was the unspoken truth. Roy's power was in isolation, in making Anna feel she was alone in a crowded world. Ben's silent presence broke that isolation. It was a challenge Roy would have to answer. The answer came on a Friday night. A freezing rain had glazed the town in a treacherous, shiny coat of ice. Anna was closing the diner, counting the till. Meg had already left. The diner was empty, the open sign turned off. As she bundled up to leave, she saw a figure sitting in a beat-up sedan parked across the street. The streetlight glinted off the ice on the windshield, but she could make out the shape of the man inside. Roy. Her breath caught. He was waiting. He knew her routine. The short walk home was a gauntlet of darkness and ice. She couldn't stay here all night. Her hand went to the phone to call Sheriff Walsh, but she knew it would take time for a deputy to get there. Time she would be alone. Then she thought of the porch light. It was useless from here. She thought of Ben, across from her house, unaware. She felt a surge of desperation. She took a deep breath, locked the diner door behind her, and started walking. Her footsteps were painfully loud in the frozen silence. The sedan's engine coughed to life. Headlights fell on her back, moving at a crawl, following her. She walked faster, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. She was still 2 blocks from her street. From the safety of the light she could signal. The car sped up slightly, pulling alongside her. The passenger window was down. "Getting cold out, Anna." Roy's voice slithered through the night. It was a voice from her nightmares, smooth and threatening. "Car's warm. Why don't you get in? We need to talk about us." She kept walking, eyes forward. "You ignoring me?" The car jerked closer, the tires crunching on the ice near the curb. "I said get in the car." She started to run, her boots slipping on the ice. The car kept pace. She could see the turn onto her street up ahead. Almost there. The car suddenly sped forward and skidded to a stop, blocking the sidewalk ahead of her. Roy got out. He was bigger than she remembered, his face harder. He smiled, but it didn't touch his cold eyes. "Long time no see." Anna backed up, but he was fast. He grabbed her arm, his grip like iron. "Let's go for a ride." Panic blinded her. She struggled, but he was too strong. He started pulling her toward the open car door. She said no. The voice came from the darkness between 2 buildings, low and final as a closing vault. Both Anna and Roy froze. Ben stepped out into the dim light. He wore no coat, just his work shirt and jeans. His hands were empty at his sides. He had come from the back way, through the alleys. He must have seen the car, seen her not coming home, and come looking. Roy recovered first, shoving Anna behind him like a shield as he faced Ben. "This is a private conversation, buddy. Move along." Ben didn't move. His eyes went from Roy's face to Anna's terrified one, then back to Roy. "Let her go. Walk away." Roy laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Or what? You gonna make me, grease monkey?" He puffed out his chest. "This is between me and my wife." "Ex-wife," Ben corrected, his voice still calm, but a new edge had entered it, cold and sharp. "And you're hurting her arm. Let go." Roy's smile vanished. He released Anna with a shove that sent her stumbling back onto the icy sidewalk. He took a step toward Ben. "You don't know who you're messing with. I'll come for you too." Ben didn't flinch. He took 1 step forward, closing the distance. He was now within arm's reach of Roy. He looked down at the smaller, angrier man, and when he spoke, the words were not loud, but they carried in the frozen air with the weight of an oath, simple, clear, and absolute. "Don't touch her again." It wasn't a request. It wasn't a warning. It was a law he was laying down, right there on the icy street. Roy stared up into Ben's calm, unblinking eyes. He saw something there that the prison bullies and the scared deputies had never shown him. Not anger, not fear, but a complete, unwavering certainty. This man was not afraid of him. This man would not back down. Not an inch. The fight drained out of Roy's posture. The bluster evaporated, leaving only a sullen, defeated rage. He glanced at Anna, then back at Ben, who hadn't moved, hadn't looked away. Muttering a curse, Roy turned, slammed his car door, and sped off, his tires spinning on the ice. Ben didn't watch him go. He immediately turned to Anna, offering a hand to help her up from the sidewalk. His touch was gentle now. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, tears of relief and shock freezing on her cheeks. How did you find me?" "You were late," he said simply. "The light wasn't on. Something was wrong." He looked toward where Roy's taillights had disappeared. "He won't listen. Not for long. Men like him only understand one thing." Anna hugged herself, trembling. The brief victory felt fragile. "What do we do?" Ben looked at her, and for the first time, she saw a deep, cold fire in his gray-blue eyes. "We end it," he said. "Before the thaw." The words hung in the icy air. "We end it." They were not the gentle promise of protection she was used to from Ben. This was different. This was a plan. Anna felt a new kind of chill, one that had nothing to do with the winter night. Ben didn't explain. He simply walked her home, a solid, silent presence at her side. When they reached her porch, he didn't leave. "I'll be on the couch tonight," he stated, not asking. "He's angry. He might come back here, thinking I've gone." Anna was too exhausted, too shaken to argue. The idea of being alone in the house after Roy's hands had been on her was unbearable. She nodded mutely, fetched a blanket and pillow, and pointed to the small sofa. Ben took off his boots, sat down, and placed the heavy wrench from his shop on the floor beside him. He didn't lie down. He just sat, watching the dark windows. Anna went to her room but didn't sleep. She lay listening to the absolute silence from her living room. He didn't snore, didn't shift. He was just there. A guard in the dark. For the first time since Roy's release, the fear didn't completely consume her. It shared space with a profound, bewildering gratitude, and a creeping anxiety about what Ben meant by ending it. The next morning, he was gone before she woke. A note was on her kitchen table, written in a precise blocky hand on a scrap of paper from his shop. * porch light on tonight means you're okay. Light off means trouble. I'll be watching. *. He was creating a new signal, a negative one. It was clever. Roy might notice a light turning on, but he would never suspect a light being off as a call for help. The following days were a tense calm. Roy made no overt appearance. But Pine Creek was a small town. News traveled. The story of the confrontation on the ice spread in hushed tones at the diner and the general store. People looked at Anna with a new, wary curiosity, and they looked at Ben with a mixture of respect and unease. He had stepped out of the shadows, and in doing so, he had drawn a line in the snow that everyone could see. Sheriff Walsh came to see Anna at the diner. He looked tired. "Ben Walker came to see me," he said, stirring his coffee unnecessarily. "Told me what happened. Told me his prediction, that Roy would escalate." "What did you say?" Anna asked, her voice low. "I said I'd do my job. I've got an alert out for Roy's car for questioning." "But Anna," he sighed, "you know how this goes. Until he does something we can hold him on, my hands are tied. A restraining order is just a piece of paper to a man like that." "I know," she whispered. "The law was a slow, cumbersome thing. Roy was a quick, venomous snake." "Ben's a good man," Walsh said, looking out the window toward the garage. "But don't let him. Don't let this turn into something that can't be taken back. You understand." She understood perfectly. The sheriff was warning her that Ben might cross a line the law couldn't. The thought terrified her and, in a secret, ashamed corner of her heart, it gave her a desperate hope. She saw Ben only in passing, a wave from his garage door, a nod on the street. He was busy. He had taken on more repair jobs, often working late. She noticed he was working on his own truck, a sturdy, old blue Ford, tuning the engine, checking the tires with meticulous care. 3 nights after the confrontation, the longest winter Anna had ever known broke with a howling, wet snowstorm. It wasn't the soft, quiet snow of before. This was a raging, blinding thing that swallowed sound and sight. The power flickered and died just after dark, plunging the town into a deep, roaring blackness. Anna lit her oil lamps, the old-fashioned kind she kept for emergencies. The golden light danced on the walls, making the shadows leap. The wind screamed around the corners of the house. It was the perfect cover. She knew it. Roy would know it. She sat at her kitchen table, her hand resting on the switch for the porch light. It was useless. The power was out all over the street. Ben's signal was gone. She was blind, and she was sure Roy was moving. An hour into the darkness, she heard it. Not a knock. A scrape. Then a low, rhythmic thump against her back door. The door with the new deadbolt. Asterisk thump. 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 Asterisk someone was trying to kick it in. Panic shot through her, cold and sharp. She grabbed the kitchen phone. The line was dead, the storm having taken the phones as well. She was cut off. The thumping grew louder, more frantic. The heavy door shuddered in its frame, but the deadbolt held. Then, the sound changed. A window at the back of the house, a small one in her laundry room, shattered. He was coming in. Anna's mind went blank with pure terror. She backed into the center of the living room, her eyes fixed on the dark hallway that led to the back rooms. She could hear him crunching over the broken glass, hear his ragged breathing. He was in her house. Anna. Roy's voice echoed, grotesquely cheerful in the darkness. I'm home. You shouldn't have changed the locks, honey. She looked around for a weapon, her hands finding only a heavy ceramic lamp. It was pitiful. She raised it as a figure filled the hallway entrance. It wasn't Roy. It was Ben. He stood silhouetted against the faint glow from the broken window, snow melting in his hair, his chest heaving. In his hand was not a wrench, but a long, heavy tire iron. He held a finger to his lips, his eyes locked on hers, wide and urgent. Then he swiftly moved to the side of the hallway entrance, pressing his back against the wall, raising the tire iron. Understanding flooded her. He had been watching. He had seen the power go out, known the signal was lost, and he had come. He had come in through the broken window. Roy stumbled into the living room from the hallway, a second later, a crowbar in his hand, a triumphant grin on his face. He saw Anna standing frozen in the lamplight, the lamp raised. Nowhere to run now, he sneered, taking a step toward her. He never took the second step. Ben moved from his hiding place with a silence that was more frightening than any shout. He didn't swing the tire iron. He simply stepped forward and brought the heavy metal bar down in a short, brutal arc onto the crowbar in Roy's hand. The sound was a deafening clang in the small room. The impact jarred the crowbar from Roy's grip, sending it skittering across the wooden floor. Roy whirled, shock erasing his triumph. Ben didn't pause. He dropped the tire iron. It was no longer needed. As Roy swung a wild fist, Ben caught the punch in his own large hand, stopping it cold. With his other hand, he grabbed a fistful of Roy's jacket. In one seamless, powerful motion, he yanked Roy off balance, spun him around, and drove him face first into the nearest wall, pinning him there with an arm twisted behind his back. It was over in 6 seconds. Roy grunted in pain and surprise, struggling uselessly against Ben's immovable hold. Ben leaned close, his voice a low, deadly whisper right by Roy's ear, just audible over the storm and Anna's pounding heart. You don't listen, Ben said, the calm finally gone, replaced by a terrifying, controlled fury. I gave you the law. You broke it. You came into her home. I'll kill you. Roy spat, writhing. Ben increased the pressure on the twisted arm, just a fraction. Roy gasped. No, Ben said, the word final. You are done. The winter is over for her. You are leaving Pine Creek tonight. You are never looking at her, never speaking her name, never breathing the same air again. If you do, I will find you. And next time, I won't be handing you over. He shoved Roy toward the shattered laundry room window. Out. Your car is stuck in a drift 2 blocks over. You will walk out of this town in this storm, and you will keep walking until you are a memory. Roy, cradling his wrist, cast a look of pure, venomous hatred at Anna, then at Ben. He saw no bluff, no hesitation, only cold, executable truth. The storm outside was less frightening than the storm in Ben's eyes. Defeated, broken in a way prison had never achieved, Roy clambered out through the broken window and vanished into the blizzard's white noise. Ben stood still for a moment, breathing deeply, letting the fury drain away. Then he turned to Anna. She was still holding the lamp, shaking so violently her teeth chattered. He walked over and gently pried it from her hands, setting it down. "He's gone," he said, his voice returning to its familiar, quiet rumble. You let him go," she stammered. "He'll come back. He'll tell the sheriff you attacked him." Ben shook his head. He walked to the front door and opened it. The storm swirled in. He pointed. Parked right outside, its engine running, headlights cutting through the snow, was Sheriff Walsh's cruiser. The sheriff himself stood on the porch, his hat pulled low. "He heard the whole thing," Ben said quietly. "On the radio receiver he loaned me. Roy confessing to breaking and entering, to assault. Every word. He's got a deputy picking him up at the county line. He'll violate his parole for this. He'll go back inside for a long, long time." Anna stared, comprehension dawning. The late nights at the garage, working on his truck, he hadn't been preparing for a fight. He'd been installing a police radio. He had gone to Sheriff Walsh with a plan, not a threat. The sheriff had agreed to listen, to be ready. Ben had baited the trap by appearing to stand down, knowing the storm and the darkness would make Roy bold. And Roy had walked right into it. Ben had ended it. Not with the violence Roy understood, but with a smarter, colder kind of strength. He had used Roy's own malice against him, and he had done it within the law. He had ended her longest winter. Sheriff Walsh stepped inside, nodding at Ben with a look of grim satisfaction. "We've got him, Anna. It's recorded. He's done." He looked at Ben. "You okay?" Ben nodded. "I'm fine." The sheriff clapped him on the shoulder and went back out into the storm to coordinate. Anna looked at Ben, the quiet man from across the street. The man who fixed locks in cars, who stood under streetlights, who had engineered not just an escape, but a resolution. The fear that had been a constant companion for months finally, completely, shattered and blew away with the storm winds. "You," she began, but words failed her. "It's over," he said simply, echoing the sheriff. He started picking up pieces of broken glass from the floor, his practical nature reasserting itself. "I'll board up the window tonight. Get you a new one tomorrow." As he worked, Anna sank into a chair, watching him. The quiet in the room was no longer a listening silence. It was a peaceful one. The winter of fear had ended, not with a shout, but with the quiet, decisive action of a man who kept his vows. The storm blew itself out by dawn, leaving Pine Creek buried under a pristine, heavy blanket of white. The world looked clean, scoured, and painfully bright. In Anna's house, the sharp, cold air still whispered through the boarded-up laundry room window, a reminder of the violation, but the fear that air carried was gone. It was just cold now. Just weather. Sheriff Walsh kept his word. Roy was picked up, shivering and furious, trying to hitch a ride on the county road. The recording of his break-in and threats, transmitted clearly over the police radio Ben had hidden in his garage, was all the evidence needed. His parole was revoked before the new snow had even settled. He was taken back to the state penitentiary, this time with a longer sentence waiting. The law, slow and patient, had finally caught up, because a quiet man had given it the means to do so. The town knew a version of the story. They knew Roy had broken in during the storm and that Ben Walker and Sheriff Walsh had caught him. It was enough. The looks of distant pity Anna used to receive in the diner softened into nods of genuine respect. The witch hunt atmosphere that had lingered around her, the unspoken blame for attracting trouble, dissipated like fog in the new sunlight. She was just Anna again. The waitress who made good coffee and remembered how you liked your eggs. Ben boarded up her window properly, and 2 days later, he installed a new one, the glass sparkling and secure. He refused any payment. Part of the job, was all he said. Their routine resumed, but the silent signals were no longer needed. The porch light remained off, a normal light on a normal house. Yet, Anna found she still looked for the glow from his garage window each evening. It was no longer a beacon of rescue, but one of quiet companionship. One afternoon, a week after the storm, Anna crossed the street with a paper bag. The bell on the garage door jingled. Ben was at his workbench, assembling a carburetor with the focus of a watchmaker. He looked up, and she saw his eyes, those calm gray-blue pools, soften almost imperceptibly at the edges. "I brought lunch," she said, placing the bag on a cleared spot on the bench. "Turkey sandwich from the diner. And pie. Apple." "Thank you," he said, wiping his hands. He didn't move to open the bag. He just looked at her, as if waiting. She took a breath, leaning against the workbench. The smell of oil and metal was familiar now, comforting. "Sheriff Walsh told me. About the radio. About the plan. You set a trap for him." Ben gave a slow nod. "He was a predator. Predators follow patterns. The storm, the dark, the isolation, it was all he could see. He never saw the net." "You could have been hurt," she said, the thought sending a late tremor through her. "So could you," he replied simply. "That was the part one couldn't allow." They stood in silence for a moment, the unspoken words hanging between them like dust motes in a sunbeam. The crisis was over. The reason for their intense, protective alliance was gone. The question of what came next lingered in the air, as palpable as the cold had been. "Why?" Anna finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It was the question that had haunted her since he'd first stood under the streetlight. "Why did you do all this? For a stranger?" Ben was quiet for a long time. He looked down at his greasy, scarred hands, then out the open garage door at the melting snow. When he spoke, his voice was low, each word chosen with care. "I had a sister, Claire." He said the name like it was made of glass. "A long time ago. She had a Roy in her life. Not a husband, a boyfriend. I was young. I was away. I told her to leave him, to call the law. I sent money. I gave advice." He paused, the memory a weight in the room. It wasn't enough. Men like that, they don't stop for advice. Or money. Or pieces of paper. By the time I got to her, it was too late. I was just quiet. Too quiet. He looked at Anna, and the pain in his eyes was raw and ancient. "I wasn't quiet for you." Anna's heart clenched. She understood now. The unwavering vigilance, the strategic patience, the vow that was more than words. It wasn't just about her. It was about a debt to a ghost, a promise made to a memory. He had been given a second chance to get it right, and he had moved heaven and earth to do so. "You ended my winter, Ben," she said, her own eyes filling. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe you just needed someone to remind you that spring always comes." He finally opened the paper bag, took out the sandwich, and offered her half. She took it. They ate there in the garage, surrounded by engines and tools, the silence between them now warm and easy, filled with shared understanding instead of shared dread. The days grew longer. The snow began its slow, relentless retreat, revealing patches of muddy earth and the first brave tips of green. Anna started planting seedlings in pots on her porch, herbs and a few flowers. Ben, watching from across the street, appeared one Saturday with 2 long planks of weathered wood and a bag of potting soil. Without a word, he built her a proper window box under her new kitchen window, sturdy enough to last for years. "For the flowers," he said, brushing the sawdust from his hands. "Thank you," she said. Then, on an impulse, she added, "I'm making a real stew tonight. Not just leftovers. If you'd like to come over. To eat. At the table." He looked at her, at the hopeful, nervous smile on her face, at the window box waiting for life. He nodded. "I'd like that." That evening was different. He didn't come as a protector or a neighbor doing a chore. He came as a guest. He brought a bottle of ginger ale. They sat at her small kitchen table, and they talked. Not about Roy, or storms, or fear. They talked about his travels as a mechanic on the racing circuit years ago. They talked about her father, who had loved to garden. They talked about dumb movies and good books and whether the mountain snow would be gone by May. They laughed, a sound that felt foreign and wonderful in Anna's small house. After washing the dishes together, they sat on her porch steps in the cool evening air, watching the first stars appear. The light from his garage was off. He was here. "What will you do now?" Anna asked softly. "The threat's gone. The garage is doing well. But Pine Creek is small." Ben was quiet for a moment, looking up at the sky. "I've lived in a lot of places," he said. "Big cities, busy towns. I was always moving, looking for something, or running from something. I'm not sure which." He turned to look at her, his profile softened by the twilight. "Here, I'm not looking. And I'm not running. Here feels finished. In a good way." Anna's heart swelled. She reached out, her hand covering his where it rested on the step between them. His fingers turned, lacing with hers. His hand was warm, rough, real. "Here feels like a beginning to me," she whispered. He brought her knuckles to his lips, a gesture so gentle it made her breath catch. It was a kiss of promise, of peace, of a future quietly chosen. The next morning, Anna stood at her new kitchen window, holding a cup of coffee. She looked at the empty window box, ready for planting. She looked across the street. Ben was raising the garage door, letting the fresh, spring-promising air inside. He saw her, raised a hand in a slow, easy wave. She waved back. She thought of the long winter, of the silence that had been filled with fear. Now, the silence was just quiet. A good quiet. The quiet of a man who had said everything he needed to say with actions, and a woman who had finally found the courage to listen, not with terror, but with hope. The town of Pine Creek would soon be green again. The longest winter was not just over. It was buried deep under the thaw, a memory softened by the gentle, steadfast warmth that had ended it. A quiet man's vow had been kept, and in its keeping, he had not just ended her winter of fear. He had planted the seed for their spring.